Well, welcome to the Right Share. Today we have as our guest Devan Batavia, general partner at Enjoy the Work.
Thank you
So
for
good to
having
see you,
me.
Devan. Welcome to Indico. We've been working together for a while, and it's just good to share your story. So tell us, who are you?
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, so, what most people don't know is I'm Indian origin, but born and raised in Kenya. After which, I headed to the States to go to engineering school. Got my engineering degree, started developing code for many years. Decided to go back to grad school, and I came across a gentleman at that time. His name was Aaron Dutta, I remember. He came to recruit at, I was at Carnegie Mellon.
Mm.
And he had this grand vision of how the internet's going to change the world.
Which year was this?
Now you're dating me. That's a good question. This was 97.
1997.
1997.
About there.
Yeah.
The internet was young.
He was young. And I said, that's the man I want to work for. He has an incredible vision. I'm sure it was his because the way he spoke was with so much passion. And I chased him until he gave me a job. And this was the beginning of the internet consulting wars. I don't know if you recall. You might not be that old.
No, I'm old enough.
And I moved to the Bay Area. This was my first taste at working at a startup. And it was the best decision I could have made. And Stefan, ever since then, that's all I've done. I've built companies up to about 2018 when I still wanted to play a role in the startup ecosystem, but I knew that I played out my role as an operator. It's hard to do this for 20, 25 years.
It's very intense.
It's intense.
It's intense.
And so I started advising. I started talking to founders, and my specialty was go-to-market. So I'd done this a few times around, starting from scratch. And so learning, who's your ideal customer? How do you find them? How do you qualify, disqualify them? How do you figure out positioning, messaging around that? What experiments do you run? Post that, how do you build repeatability? And then how do you scale? And many founders are either product people or engineers. They've found this problem that they want to solve, but they generally don't have an experience on how to build a company around it.
Right. And it's not something you kind of learn in university either, right? It's a very specific skill and set of processes that you develop. Right?
That's exactly right. And I just had the luck to find it a few times around, that I learned that there's a pattern to this.
There's a pattern. So how did you develop that pattern? Let's go back to 97. You joined the startup.
Yeah.
What did it do and how did it go from there?
Well, tell you what, in 97, I first joined a consulting company. So I hadn't got product experience, but I'd learned how to work with clients. One of the biggest skills I picked is how to build a deck.
Mm-hmm.
And It was an incredible skill.
Yes.
Like if anyone can go into management consulting for just a couple of years to just learn how to communicate well.
I did exactly the same. I was for 2 years in a consulting.
Isn't it an amazing skill?
Like PowerPoint school.
Right. It really was. So I picked up this one skill of communication and specifically around building decks there. I decided that my future was not in consulting, but in product. I wanted to, again, go build. And I'll fast forward to 2007 because I played multiple roles. I played product manager, I played marketer.
In different startups.
In different startups, BD. So I sort of had this ability to play different roles at different organizations. And
in the Valley.
In the Valley, all in the Valley. And then in a role where was BD, but played more into the sales because we were OEMing. This was one specific startup where we OEM technology. And it was really sales more than BD. And that was my first taste at sales. And I'm like, wow, I might actually be decent at this. And so I started taking more and more time into the go-to-market role. And that's where I learned how to build a go-to-market function as a role itself.
Or did you learn it with other people or just on the job?
Both. And so I'll go back to 2007. This was an interesting time. I worked at a company called Jive Software. Think about Jive as Slack version 1. So we're building that entire category. It hadn't been even created at that time. And I moved actually to Europe. I was in Switzerland for 3 years building all the Europe capabilities for the organization. We had just pivoted from something called discussion forums to this entire platform where you can communicate internally with others. So think at that time in 2007, remember, Facebook was still in its infancy.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you go to a CIO, I remember I had this discussion with the CIO at Lufthansa, and he's like, why do I want a Facebook for my employees? It's just distracting.
Right.
And I'm
There
like,
was this discussion of preventing people from
doing their work.
accessing. Yes.
Right? And so that started even thinking about, look, we're going to run into objections. How do you handle those objections? How do you document them so that once you start hiring, people are going to face similar objections, but they need to know how to respond to them, right? So we started learning the hard way, which is make mistakes. Just make mistakes. Even selling to the wrong customers was a mistake. But if you didn't sell to the wrong customers, you wouldn't know that. Here's a profile that you don't go after again. And so that taught us the lesson of not only qualifying, but disqualifying early on. What's the profile of a customer you don't want right now? Because it may actually take you from, if your product roadmap is going this way, it's going to take you that way. Because they want something different, and your vision is something else. So as a team, we started learning there was no, like, someone had done this 2 or 3 times saying, okay, I'll teach you. You just had to learn as you go on. Now, at that point, didn't even recognize that there's a process around this until I did it the second time. And I'm like, wait, I used a number of things I'd learned and built similar processes, and then did it a third time. And I'm like, wait, there's a formula here.
But were there other people decodifying the formula as well?
No, because they're always different teams. So it was from my perspective, I could see that there's a formula that's being built. And this is the formula that as an advisor, then I'm like, well, we should be teaching this to founders, saying, follow these steps. And these are the steps. And here's what you're looking for. Here's what you're listening for. And based on what you hear, you can sort of determine which direction to go into.
So and so how did you transition? Did you ever found your own company, or how did you eventually transition into being an advisor?
Yeah, I never founded my own company. I was always early though. So I was among the first 5 or 10 employees and the first individual to hit go-to-market. Right? So I can never claim founder status or co-founder status, but I can certainly say that I was there 3 times in a row, before any revenue and before any customers. So the product was in its infancy. Mm-hmm. And so we had to figure it out from scratch, right? And so once I left that operator role, and the last role was as a CRO. So I managed marketing, sales, and customer success. And after I left that role, I decided, I wonder if founders can use this knowledge. And so I spoke to a founder, 2 founders, 3 founders, started working with them, helping them, and then realized that what I'm actually providing is more than go-to-market. Because even before you start talking about go-to-market, you have to figure out what your goals and objectives are. Mm-hmm. And I was so baffled that many founders didn't even know what they're working backwards from. So I'm like, okay, time out. Before we do this, let's start figuring out what our milestone is. Let's say they're seed funded or pre-seed funded and they're venture backed. They're like, okay, well, we need to get to a seed round or an A or whatever that next milestone is. All right. Do you know what you need to get there?
Right.
Surprisingly, many didn't. So, okay, let's go research saying what you need. And now we have data. 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was not as much data. It's easier now saying, okay, if you want to be a Series A startup, particularly in the Valley, you need to have at least $1 million, $2 million recurring revenue, mm-hmm. right? And there's other growth metrics and other things. So it's like, hey, do you know these are the metrics you have to hit? How much time do we have? What's your run rate? So we start building out the entire objective framework before we can even start hitting that.
Kind of like the full stack of.
Yeah. So I started working with founders in this fashion. At that same time, I met my partner now, Jonathan, who was doing a similar thing at Enjoy the Work. And so we, by chance, through a mutual friend, we met up and we were like, we're kind of doing the same thing. And there's a need in the marketplace such that where does a founder go to learn the skill of being a CEO? And a founder and a CEO are two completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
So where do they pick up the skills? Well, they have one of three options. There isn't a school they can go to, but they can go to an accelerator. Generally, they're in an accelerator for about 3 to 6 months, and then they get kicked out. They still got another 8 years to go on average to build a company, right? They can learn from the VCs, like yourself, but you're doing a lot of different things.
Right.
Right?
We're not actually managing the company at all.
No, you're not. The third is they might actually have an advisor who's another founder, but that founder is actually building their own company and they might be able to donate an hour a month or something to that extent. Mm-hmm. So who's there every step of the way to help them and hold them accountable? We said, there's a hole here. And I wish I had someone, because we had to learn by making mistakes. And so I love to say, I want to my founders, make new mistakes. Please don't make the mistakes I made, right? So that's where we found that there's a gap where founders don't have someone to turn to when they have a lot of questions, whether it's about hiring, whether it's go-to-market, whether it's fundraising, doesn't matter what it is. Where do they turn to? Mm-hmm. And this is what we ended up doing.
But there's always, with founders and quite often also with VCs, there's a bit of resistance to advisory, external advisory. How do you overcome that and why do you think this is wrong?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And this goes again back to objection handling, right? So when VCs have an objection to, well, why do you need an external founder? If the founder is already convinced that, Enjoy the Work can help, we just say, look, let us sell ourselves. Just put us in touch with the VC that has this objection. And so then we ask the VCs that, let's say you as a VC and the founder have agreed hypothetically that you need it's time to get a VP of sales. Who's going to interview the new prospects and what's the hiring process and what are the qualities? And do you know they are possibly about 4 personas to VP of sales depending on the stage? Who's teaching the founder on which persona to get for and what do you look for? And that's at that time the VC goes, that's a good point. And then
often it's not the VCs.
It is not the VCs,
and the founders don't have the experience to know what they're looking for.
That's exactly right. And so that's where we're not only teach them on how to hire, but then we also interview at the same time the candidates and on behalf of our founders as well. So,
but there's this resistance from the founders of saying, well, I need to internalize these competences, and maybe I don't want advisors. I want people to join when they've already done this, so I don't need advisors. When the resistance is from the founders, how do you overcome that?
So look, we also qualify who we work with. If they're founders that, one, are not ready to learn, or there's resistance in learning and being coached, we actually won't take them in.
Does that happen?
Surprisingly. And what we found from our data is if we make the mistake by not catching it during the interview process, we'll know within the first 30 days. And so we'll just call the relationship quits at that point. Our relationships tend to, with our founders, last years. They're in order of 24 to 36 months. And this is when even our contract is cancelable in 7 days. We never hold any VC hostage, any founder hostage. So they either see value week after week or they fire us. Mm-hmm. Or on the side that they're not coachable, we'll have to let them go.
So let's go back into the basics. What are the things that you see that are the biggest challenges in terms of particularly go-to-marketing and sales and business development? What are the big themes that you've come across over these last, 7 years as an advisor? 7, 8 years.
Yeah, but it's been 7 years. You're right. Stefan, it depends on the stage. So let's take pre-seed, seed stage as an example. right? The founder is looking to find some traction, right? Let's assume they have a few customers or no customers and they're trying to find traction. Now, there's a tendency to throw darts at the wall and see what sticks. Now, that's important until you figure out what sticks and then ask the question, why those customers? Why did those buy but the others didn't? And if you continue that process of just throw darts on the wall, you can't find repeatability, right? So one of the most common mistakes is trying to not defining their ICP, your ideal customer profile. And once you sell to, say, 3, 5, 10 customers, and by the way, I'm assuming B2B here for the moment, you have to see what's the common ground. The second mistake they make is they take ICP and equate that to segmentation. And there's really two different processes. Segmentation is really a marketing process, and ICP is really understanding and defining what type of customer will buy and going deep into it. So I was just talking to a prospect the other day. They're saying, well, we sell to insurance and financial services. I'm like, that's a huge market. That's huge. And for a company that's doing something like 60K MRR, that's too wide a net. So how do you bring that back in such that you qualify and disqualify at the same level? Like, you have to understand which works and doesn't work. And so a lot of time is wasted in targeting prospects that may never end to a close. Because prospects are going to be interested in listening to your story. They may even take you to trial. But if there's no intention to actually buy, if there's not a problem you're truly solving for them, then they're going to waste your time. And this happens so often. And so the skill of disqualifying early is really not found often. And so one of the first things we have to train on is define your ICP, just have a hypothesis. And as you experiment, iterate on that ICP definition and learn to say, this is not a good customer for us today, and push them off.
Right. How do you square that with product development? Because often at early stage, the product is evolving very fast, right? And there's some features, but then it becomes a full-fledged product. So the ICP also changes all the time.
All the time. The ICP changes as you grow, right? But it also changes if you pivot. So it's a fluid thing, and it happens a lot. So it's going to happen now. As a young company, let's assume it's a pre-seed company with anywhere from 5 to 20 employees, right? The go-to-market function is generally the founders at this point. But the founders and product are hand in hand. So you're listening to what value are we creating, and is this value in line with the vision that we have, right? And product sort of follows on saying, yes, it is, or no, it isn't, or you're taking us completely to the left field, and this is not where we're supposed to go. And that's the point you decide this may not be the right customer. I found in my past and this is the danger, where there's this, we call it the shiny object syndrome. You find a customer who's willing to pay you a lot of money, but wants to custom build so much stuff.
Start asking all these features, all this stuff.
And your vision is this way. They want to solve this problem, and they're going into a different tangent. And that's the time you need some courage to say, that's not it. We need to cut that off. Either tell them no, that we're not going to build these things and they have to live with it, or they're just the wrong customer and you got to go find the right customers.
This happens very, very often.
Very often. I've been prone to it to myself.
Of course, it's a shiny object, right? Everybody likes it.
Yeah.
And what happens when the companies are more sort of Series A, Series B?
So this moves into trying to figure out repeatability, right? Now, repeatability is a function of a whole slew of things that we found. One, it's if you truly have identified your ICP, you know who you're selling to. Then you need to have repeatability in the personas that you sell to. Now I'm moving into sort of enterprise selling. So you might be selling to a decision maker, a signatory, an influencer, the user, and they all solving a problem, but looking at it at a different lens. So now you have to go through persona mapping, saying, what's the message I need to send to each persona when I'm selling into that organization? That's part of the repeatability. The sales process has to be repeatable as well, saying we've got these 5 stages. I know the exit criteria in every stage. And once we've got a pattern, we just got to hire people to rinse and repeat. That's level 2 of repeatability. Level 3 is finding the right persona to hire that says, I know how to just go and rinse and repeat. I'm good at these stages. I know how to ask questions. I know how to qualify. I know how to do discovery, so on and so forth, right? And there's a repeatable part to that. The 4th repeatability piece is I've got a predictable conversion rate from qualified lead to close. Let's assume it's 20 to 30%. Once it's getting to close, I have a predictable way to onboard them. Another measure and a metric that I really love is time to value. How close and how fast can we get value to them? And then what's the repeatability to expansion? If it's in lend and expand. Now, all of this is repeatable. I've got a repeatable sales process. I've got a repeatable hiring process. I've got a repeatable onboarding process. And you have to start figuring out that flywheel so you can get that in motion, right? And so then we move them to that stage. What pieces of these have you figured out that are repeatable, and where are the roadblocks to make them repeatable?
I imagine that when you start working with these companies, they have no idea about this, right? They're just trying to sell. Outbound or inbound,
yeah.
But there's really no, they're just sort of all over the place.
Well, they're throwing darts on the wall, right? And again, there's a place for that. I don't want to take that away. I think early on, you have to throw those darts on the wall to figure out what sticks. But at some point, once you know that, then you're like, okay, why are those sticking and why are those not? And the metaphor I'm using is translatable to what channel's working, which customers are really customers, what messaging sticks, like why is that working? And once it's working, you start actually putting it into a repeatable process.
Yeah. Would you say that, the success cases that you see in B2B SaaS in the Valley, they use these methods? Or were they just lucky and the product sells by itself and that's it? It's probably a mix of both.
It's a mix of both, right? So what I've seen in the Valley is that if and we talk about PMF so much, right? And for me, PMF, I have a definition, but there's also a second part to PMF, which is just a feel. Now, here's where you could get lucky. You've stumbled onto a massive problem and a hole where the timing is just right. And you're like,
you have product market fit.
And you have product market fit. And you haven't had to pivot 20 times to get there, but it's just the right time for this product, and suddenly it takes off.
You're willing to pay for it, and that's it.
Correct. And there's luck there.
There's luck there.
Right? And so you have to be at the right place at the right time. Now, the skill that's really important in that time, if you figure that piece out, you got to be really good at hiring and as a founder, and then walking away from let people do their job.
Yeah. But the problem is that that might last up to a certain ceiling of sales, right? After that, you have to be more professional.
You do, because you need processes, right? Everything needs to work in some sort of predictable fashion, right? So as soon as you find this PMF, now it's like, I need to professionalize this and start putting process on top of things where it was chaos. And that transition is really difficult.
For sure.
It's really difficult to move to. We're just trying things, experimenting. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing that. Now we need to put process throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And we need people who've gone through this at least once, if not twice before, and start implementing some processes so that it works.
Great. So last but not least, why did you come to Portugal, and how is it going here?
One, it's going amazing. I love the country. The people are incredible. The weather is really lovely, except for, as we spoke earlier, maybe early this year it rained a lot. We've adapted well to being here. So I really do like it. The reason why I'm here, and it's kind of related to what I learned in growing up in the Valley. I have 2 daughters. They will be 15 years of age in a couple of weeks. They grew up in the Valley. and then only seen the valley.
Mhm.
We travel, but they've never lived anywhere else. And I had the fortune of growing up as an Indian, as an immigrant in Africa, moving to the States,
So
living in different,
experience.
I was sort of nomad. I had the fortune of knowing multiple languages, knowing multiple cultures, and I felt my daughters lacked that.
Needed that sort of exposure.
They did. And the two things that I really, really absorbed of the startup world is one is perseverance. And I wanted to give this to my kids. And so moving here was really difficult for them. It was everything changed. School changed. They had a uniform, where they didn't before. Curriculum changed. We left family behind. Their friends changed.
Right.
They're in their teenage years. Yeah. But I'm like, look, if they can get through this, they'll look back saying, yeah, we fought that and we made it. Right. So I wanted to give them the artificial, if you will, process of learning perseverance. Because I think perseverance drives grit, which I think it's absolutely necessary in the startup ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Second, I want them to learn how to take risks, which is also so phenomenally important in the startup ecosystem. And these values that I captured in being in the startup world, I wanted them like ingrained for my kids. So not only do they have to learn Portuguese here and learn Spanish and they have to make new friends, and all of that is a risk. It's a complete new world and they have to take that risk. Now, if they can learn to take risk and see that there is no failure, or even with failure, you just get up and keep moving, I think I've given them a beautiful gift if they can embody it and then grow with these two skill sets or value systems. And so we chose Portugal because of many different reasons: people, weather, cost of living, so many different things. But it was really driven by trying to give my daughters these two skills.
And how are you finding the tech ecosystem here?
I'm surprised how thriving it is. I didn't expect it to be this large, actually. And so being in this ecosystem here, I'm just loving it. I'm surprised how bubbly it feels. Like there's so much going on. I can't keep up with it. So as much as I thought I walk away from it, having lived in the Bay Area in the Valley for 25 years, no, it's here, and I'm so thankful that it's happening here.
Well, thank you for being here, Devan. It was great to see you.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Keep enjoying the work.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.